Hey, Scooby! Scooby, Scooby-Doo, looking for you. Scooby, Scooby-Doo, where are you? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without you. Scooby, Scooby-Doo, Scooby, Scooby-Doo.
Happy Halloween, Scooby-Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 2 Episode 6 review of the new Scooby-Doo movies. And before you guys ask, yes, I am in my Freddy Krueger attire with my Freddy Krueger sweater, my Freddy Krueger hat, and, of course, my Freddy Krueger glove. Why? Because it's Halloween, why not? And I wanted to give you guys a little fun special treat. And yeah, Freddy has nothing to do with this video, but this is who I'm going to dress up as for Halloween. I do have a Freddy mask off in the corner somewhere, but I will be saving that for, when I actually go out and scare trick-or-treaters. But I thought I'd give you guys a nice little spice up today, just for you guys, just a little fun treat since today's Halloween. But of course, last time I continued my 2024 Halloween special with a review of Season 2, Episode 5 of the new Scooby-Doo movies. I hope you guys enjoyed that. But of course, today, I'll be covering Season 2, Episode 6 of the new Scooby-Doo movies, titled The Weird Winds of Winona, which was released on October 13th, 1973. The short synopsis of the episode is, while on their way to the Oceanside Auto Rally, the gang spend the night in the recently deserted city of Winona. In the morning, they meet Speed Buggy and his crew, and together they try to determine where the haunting winds are coming from. So today's guest star is Speed Buggy. Now, who is Speed Buggy? Well, I'm pretty sure you guys are all familiar with Speed Buggy's history. He's very similar in vein to Josie and the Pussycats. Often is considered one of Scooby-Doo's clones. So if you're a fan of Scooby-Doo, like a diehard fan like me, and a fan of Hanna-Barbera's, properties and their clones of Scooby-Doo, specifically Scooby-Doo's clones and copycats, like if you're aware of their history, you should be quite familiar with Speed Buggy, whether you're a diehard Scooby-Doo fan or if you're a fan of Hanna-Barbera in general. But just in case if you guys aren't familiar with who Speed Buggy is, here's just a quick rundown of who he is. So Speed Buggy is a fictional talking orange dune buggy created by Hanna-Barbera. Now, Speed Buggy starred in his own show, his own animated show, simply titled Speed Buggy. Speed Buggy's show would run concurrently with the new Scooby-Doo movies, starting in September of 1973, all the way up to December of 1973. The Speed Buggy show and its characters were inspired by the Walt Disney Pictures film, The Love Bug, and the Japanese Speed Racer anime franchise. So the show followed the titular Speed Buggy, who along with his three teenage friends, Mark, Debbie, and Tinker, would participate in races around the world while also dealing with villains and crooks, such as diamond thieves, carb sex doctors, and evil pirates. The show would run for one season and 16 episodes, ending the same year it began, and would run concurrently, like I said, with the new Scooby-Doo movies. And I believe at this time they were on episode 6. So the titular Speed Buggy was, of course, voiced by Mel Blanc. Now, any fanatic of animation should know who Mel Blanc is, because Mel Blanc has voiced every cartoon character under the sun that you could think of. Most famously, he's voiced Bugs Bunny. So Mel Blanc was born on May 30th, 1908 in San Francisco, California, and sadly he has since passed away on July 10th, 1989 in Los Angeles, California. Mark, the brains of the group, was voiced by Michael Bell. So Michael Bell was born on July 30th, 1938 in Brooklyn, New York, And he's still alive today, 86 years old. In fact, it seems he's one of probably 2 cast members of Speed Buggy that is still alive to this day. Then, of course, there's Debbie, the beautiful teenage girl and leader of the group, who is voiced by Arlene Galanka. Arlene Galanka was born on July 23rd, 1936 in Chicago, Illinois, and sadly she has since passed away on May 31st, 2021 in West Hollywood, California. And then finally there's Tinker. Tinker's a southern mechanic who is Speed Buggy's best pal and designated driver. Tinker is voiced by Phil Luther Jr. Now, I couldn't find any information about Phil Luther Jr. I don't know when he was born, where he was born, if he's even alive still, like if he died, nothing. And as far as I'm aware, his credits seem to only be on Speed Buggy and the new Scooby-Doo movies, so I'm not really sure what happened to him after that. Yeah, I guess he lived quite a quiet life or something, but yeah, I could not find any information on him, sadly, but yeah, that's who voices Tinker. Now, at the time of this episode, like I said, Speed Buggy was on his 6th episode of his series. The 6th episode was running concurrently with this crossover episode. It aired the same day. So, Speed Buggy was still doing his show, was still on his show, but, was 6 episodes in. So as per usual, I'll be watching Season 2, Episode 6 of the new Scooby-Doo movies on the new Scooby-Doo movies, the Almost Complete Collection. This Almost Complete Collection has every episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies, minus the Addams Family episode. If you want to know more about that, I go in depth with it on my Season 1, Episode 3 review. However, you can now view the Addams Family episode in good quality on the HBO Max app. So there's that. If you want any options for it. If you don't want to have to go digging for it anymore, then you can watch it on there. Now, what's my experience with Speed Buggy? Well, Speed Buggy I am familiar with a little bit. Speed Buggy, because I'm a Scooby-Doo diehard fan, and because I'm familiar with the copycats, I believe I remember saying this in the Josie and the Pussycats crossover episode, that we were going to deal with another copycat or clone of Scooby-Doo, whatever you want to call it, that would cross over. That is, of course, Speed Buggy. Now, I'm familiar with Speed Buggy in that respect, that he's a Scooby-Doo copycat and clone and is often compared to Scooby-Doo. The characters are very much inspired by Scooby-Doo. Mark is often compared to Fred. Debbie is often compared to Daphne and Velma. Tinker is compared to Shaggy a lot. And, of course, Speed Buggy is compared to Scooby. So in that respect, I am familiar with the Speed Buggy crew and Speed Buggy himself as characters and their legacy as Scooby-Doo clones and copycats, but not so much as themselves, their own entity. Like, I've never seen their show. I never watched the show that had their own solo show. And I've never seen anything. I don't think Speed Buggy had anything outside of that. So it was just that show. And yeah, I hadn't seen anything besides this crossover episode with Scooby-Doo. Although I will say this episode did make me very, interested in Speed Buggy. Speed Buggy's definitely one of the copycats and clones, just like Josie, that gets talked about a lot when somebody asks you, are you familiar with Scooby-Doo clones and copycats? Do you love Scooby-Doo? Here's some other ones, and people often recommend Josie and the Pussycats, Speed Buggy, Captain K-Man and the Teen Angels, and the Funky Phantom Crew. Those are usually the big 4. But yeah, I am familiar. Like I said, I'm familiar with Speed Buggy in that respect. But I am not familiar with the show, and I've never seen the show. But if you guys want to let me know about your history with Speed Buggy, then please do let me know. Are you a fan of Speed Buggy? Are you not a fan of Speed Buggy? Have you seen the show? Have you not? And yeah, just, let me know in the comment section below. And, also tell me if you think he's a good guest star or not. So let me know. Now, as far as this episode's reception is concerned, I believe most fans do like this episode. I've heard good things about it. Most people praise it. Obviously, this is another Hanna-Barbera crossover, just like Josie and the Pussycats in the Genie episode. So I'm not surprised that people do seem to like this episode. And since this is another one of Scooby-Doo's clones, copycats, whatever you want to call it, crossing over with Scooby, I'm not surprised that people view this highly. But yes, it is often considered one of the better episodes, since this is Scooby teaming up with one of his clones, copycats, like I said, whatever you want to call it. But is this episode good? Does it break the streak of 3-star episodes? Or are we going to get another one that will continue the trend of 6 3-star episodes? So will we get a great episode that is 4 or 5 stars? Will we get a shitty episode that is 1 to 2 stars? Or, like I said, will we get a 6 average episode, and will the streak continue, or will it end? Well, let's find out, shall we? So let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies. The episode begins with the gang driving through some farm country on their way to Winona. They plan to stop off there and stay for the night, and then they plan to see the Oceanside Auto Rally the next day, where Speed Buggy is a special guest. Fred says that he can hardly wait to see that little car in action. We then cut to Speed Buggy and the gang, and we are introduced to his team, which consists of Tinker, Debbie, and Mark. Interesting thing about Mark is that in the title sequence and in his own show, he's portrayed as Caucasian. But in this episode, he's portrayed as possibly Native American, which never shows up again. So I'm having a hard time wondering, like, what are we supposed to believe? Like, is he Native American and they screwed up on the other episodes? Or is he Caucasian and just, you know, was fucked up with his skin tone on this episode? It's very odd. I'm inclined to believe that the writers originally just intended for him to be Caucasian, and that they just screwed up in this episode for some reason and made his skin tone darker than it should. I don't know why. It's never explained, but hey, it is what it is. Then we cut back to the Mystery Machine, where we now see the gang entering Winona, where the original population was 627, but it's now down to 10 people, according to the welcome sign. At a boarded-up hotel, we see that it and the whole town is completely out of business. So with nowhere else to go, the boys decide to camp outside the Mystery Machine, while the girls sleep inside the Mystery Machine. The gang are woken up at the stroke of midnight by some heavy winds and don't sleep a wink all night. Once daytime hits, the gang pick up their supplies and roll out as quickly as possible so they can get the fuck out of that place because they're all creeped out, especially Shaggy and Scooby. And during their departure, the gang almost hits Speed Buggy and the two groups end up meeting. Both gangs recognize one another and the gang decide to travel to the Oceanside Car Rally with the Speed Buggy and his crew together. It's interesting that both groups know each other. It's very odd because, like the Genie episode, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense why the Scooby Gang and the Speed Buggy crew would know each other. Like, how would the Speed Buggy crew know the Scooby Gang? Are the Scooby Gang infamous mystery solvers? Have they become very popular? And how would the Scooby Gang know? I mean, I guess at the beginning of the episode, it's shown that Scooby and the gang are familiar with Speed Buggy and know who he is because, like, they're going there to see him. So I guess you could explain that away. But with the Speed Buggy crew, I'm not sure why. Maybe the Scooby Gang has started to gain notoriety, and the Speed Buggy crew have heard about their adventures and mystery solving, and maybe, you know, and that's how they know them. I don't know. It's very odd to me that they would know who the Scooby Gang were. On the way there, Freddy hits a truck backing out of his farm, and there's a minor fender bender where the Mystery Machine gets the worst of the damage. Thankfully, the gang aren't harmed in it, and neither is the farmer. The farmer, named Clem Duncan, who caused the accident, offers shelter in his barn to the gang while Tinker fixes up the Mystery Machine as compensation for it, and basically says that he's sorry for backing up into their car and offers them shelter. Unfortunately, Tinker says that it will take a few days and they'll have to miss the race. Because they'll be there for a few days, the girls can sleep in the house while the boys can rest up in the barn. Man, the girls get the more better of everything. Like, they always get the best rooms and everything, while the guys, like, they get fucking forced into sleeping in the ground or outside. You know, it's not easy doing that. Thankfully, they give them pillows and you know, a blanket. Otherwise, it'd be hard. I would find it hard to sleep in a barn or just out on the fucking street like that. Mr. Duncan explains that the strange winds have been occurring for 2 months now and have scared off most of the population. Since the two gangs will be spending the night there, they decide that they'll figure out the source of the winds when they strike the town at midnight. Midnight then strikes, and so do the weird winds, and so the gang head out into the ghost town to explore what's going on. Oddly enough, though, for some reason, you know, they still use a daytime shot when they're trying to convey that it's now nighttime, and then it changes into nighttime. So, great job, animators, for reusing that daytime sequence. You could have maybe tweaked that a little bit. You know, all you have to do is make it nighttime. Heading through an old cemetery, they head to an old church where a bell's being pulled. They figure that someone must be pulling the bell at midnight, and every time it gets pulled at midnight, you know, the winds start up. So they figure that they'll be able to figure out this mystery by investigating why the bell's, you know, who's pulling the bell, and, you know, and if that has any connection with the winds. Inside the church, the gang do not find anyone. However, a mysterious figure causes some haunted shenanigans that scares everyone away. I do like the church chase sequence. The church is actually the best setting, you know, the best set piece of the episode. The church in the cemetery is probably the creepiest the episode ever gets, because it's really freaky and really creepy. Like, I don't blame Shaggy and Scooby and Speed Buggy and Tinker not wanting to go there at all, because it is very creepy, very eerie. I would not want to go through that cemetery, and the church is just as creepy as shit. But I love, you know, the haunted shenanigans that this hooded, you know, mysterious hooded figure causes, which causes them to, you know, all be spooked and run out of there, which I don't blame them. And Speed Buggy helps save Scooby when Scooby somehow gets stuck to the bell rope.
Now what? Yikes!
This place is for the birds, but not this bird.
Scooby-Doo, where are you? Where are you? Hang on. Zoom, zoom.
Gangway!
Wait, Shaggy!
Come on, Tink.
Exploring the town once more, the gang see a shadowy figure and chase him into a clothing store. The creepy figure hides behind several mannequins and more hijinks occur. With an unsuccessful night of ghost hunting, the gang head back to the barn and try to get a good night's rest. They are woken up early the next morning as Tinker hammers out the Mystery Machine bumper as he wants to get the fuck out of there before spending one more night in this haunted town, which I do not blame him for 1 second after the creepy shit they saw last night. Mr. Duncan cooks everyone up some pancakes, and afterwards, Debbie, Velma, and Daphne decide to head to the village with Speed Buggy. Shaggy and Scooby tag along as well, as the town feels safe to them during the daylight. In town, they find the bank is still open. There, they meet the bank owner named Mr. Peabody. Inside his office, they hear a weird wind in his bank vault and see money blowing around inside. The gang then leave thinking they found no clues, but fortunately for them, they come across the Winona Hall of Records, and we get a fun joke where Shaggy thinks that they're talking about musical records. But of course, it just is city records. One of the town's ghosts causes trouble for the gang and locks Scooby and Shaggy in a room. Unable to find the cowardly duo, Debbie rushes back with Speed Buggy to get the boys to help find Scooby and Shaggy. With the Mystery Machine fixed, everyone is now back at the Hall of Records, and Speed Buggy uses his hot exhaust to melt the lock on the door that Shaggy and Scooby were locked behind. They also find an old parchment map of the whole area, which Scooby was for some reason wrapped in like a hot dog, and Velma kind of makes a nice little joke about it. Which was weird because we didn't see how Scooby got tangled up in that, and I feel bad for him. But thankfully Fred and Velma helped him out of it. On the map, they discover a cave system under the mountain, and Freddy concludes that maybe the winds are coming through those caves. They then decide to explore the caves for further clues, and, force Tinker, Shaggy, Scooby, and Speed Buggy to go along with them, because they don't want to go, but they're outnumbered. So they can't really do anything about it. I feel bad for Shaggy, Scooby, Tinker, and Speed Buggy because they don't want to get involved in it, but they're forced by their very, nosy and leader-filled friends to go investigate, and it isn't fair for them. But hey, it is what it is, and it ends up being a good thing at the end. The trip to the caves is rather treacherous, but the gang finally make it to the cave entrance. The reason it's really treacherous is because Speed Buggy has to use all his strength to help, not only get, his crew up there, but the Scooby Gang as well in their Mystery Machine. And then when they get over the hump of the mountain, then they go down real fast and almost crash. And thankfully they don't. There just is a lot of close calls with the Scooby Gang and the Speed Buggy crew. Like, they almost get hurt a couple times. Not because of any opposing force, just because of their very poor, poor judgment and poor timing for driving in these very dangerous roads and back roads. I guess Speed Buggy, because he's trying to do that for his racing, because I guess he does off-road racing, I guess that's natural for him, but it's not good for the Scooby Gang. Like, you don't want to get the Mystery Machine banged up. You just got it fixed. Come on, guys. At the caves, they don't hear any wind, but they are stalked by a mysterious hooded figure that creates a few frights. First to note is that I find it funny that Shaggy, makes a joke saying that because there's no wind blowing there, that they should just go. And Velma says that he's got a one-track mind, and he rolls with it, and he says, yeah, and my mind thinks we're on the wrong track, which is a great joke. And yeah, there's a fun little scene where both gangs are investigating the caves, and they get separated. Speed Buggy gets separated from his crew because he gets stuck on some type of stalactite or stalagmite, whatever you want to call it. And Shaggy and Scooby lose theirs because they get spooked by a lot of different things. And Shaggy and Scooby end up meeting back up with Speed Buggy. And I don't know, I just love the dynamic between Shaggy, Scooby, and Speed Buggy. Like, Speed Buggy is just so much fun in this episode. Like, he genuinely is Mel Blanc really did a great job with Speed Buggy. Like, he just really did. Like, Speed Buggy is just a fun character. Like, he's definitely one of my favorite Scooby-Doo clones, copycats, or knockoffs. Like, he's just it's really cool seeing him interact with the Scooby Gang, and as well as his crew interacting with the other members of the Scooby Gang. Like, it's just a lot of fun, and I enjoy Shaggy, Scooby, and Speed Buggy's chemistry in this episode. Heck, you can even throw Tinker in there for a little bit, because Tinker has some chemistry a little bit with Shaggy too, and has some of Shaggy's cowardice.
Wait for me! Oh boy. I think I'm lost.
Where is everybody?
Well, I don't know.
I'd better call him.
Meep!
Shaggy? Scooby?
Speed Buggy.
Like, are we glad to see you?
Likewise.
The hooded figures start up the wild winds, which causes a lot of difficulty as the gang try to navigate the caves. The wind eventually blows them around and into a room where they are locked inside by the mysterious hooded figures. Speed Buggy uses his wheels to dig through the cave wall, and they enter a room with a giant wind machine, which is basically an airplane without any wings, and the powerful propellers can cause hurricane-like conditions inside the cave system. Shaggy even finds that out real quickly when he turns it on to try to use it as a way to get out of there, and Mark and Tinker are trying to get him to stop, and then Shaggy gets the point and turns it off. As the gang try to leave the caves, we then find 4 hooded men playing cards in the cave. Both gangs are discovered by the hooded men, and so the 4 hooded men take chase. However, both Speed Buggy and Scooby-Doo's, gangs, both are able to use their heads to trap all 4 of the hooded men in some form of contraption. One gets, trapped in a hole, one gets trapped by a machine, another one gets trapped by some dirt or something like that. There's also a part in the episode where Velma's, with Speed Buggy, and then she's not with Speed Buggy in the next scene, and Some of the chase, this long chase scene has a lot of. It feels weird because it feels like some things are out of order. I don't know. At least to me, it does. Because like Velma will be with Speed Buggy and Shaggy and Scooby in one scene, and then somehow she's not with Speed Buggy anymore. Now her and Daphne are being chased by another guy when they were being chased by two other guys earlier, before Speed Buggy saved her. And then Shaggy and Scooby were in a desk in the beginning of the chase scene, and then at the end of the chase scene, they were also in a desk. So it's very confusing. Like, I don't know if they were out of sequence, these chase scenes, or if, they just weren't consistent with it, and, and this was actually how the chase scene played out, but just, we didn't see we just missed some certain bits to help connect the dots. But either way, it happens. And so, fed up with the wild winds, Mark tunnels an exit out of the cave with the wind machine and drives it into the ocean. The sheriff and Mr. Duncan see the gang drive out of the tunnel, and the two gangs present the trapped hooded figures to the sheriff. Scooby and Shaggy also drag out a scale model of the town, where they see that a hotel is now on Mr. Duncan's property, and they figured out fast that the ghosts were trying to scare everyone out of town so they could buy the property cheap and turn it into a resort. On the back of the map, they see the words PJ Peabody Development Co., and Mr. Peabody, the bank manager, then rips off his mask and runs off. There's a bit of an animation error at this point because there's still 4 cloaked men still tied up there when there really should only be 3, because throughout all the episode, it's never implied that there were more than 4 men. So clearly, I'm not led to believe that there's supposed to be 5 men. There were 4 men, but for some reason, they had still 4 men behind Mr. Peabody, even though he was unmasked and out of the binding that he was in. So, I'm assuming, it is what it is, and it's a weird animation error, but yeah, I don't think there was like 5 men or anything like that. I don't think there was an extra 5th guy that we missed. I think that it was just a weird animation error. Unfortunately for Mr. Peabody, Speed Buggy is much faster and catches the villain with ease. And so the episode ends with another mystery solved, and the two gangs head off to the race as they should have just enough time to make it there. Which is odd, because it was explained earlier by Tinker that they would miss the race, and then it would take a couple days. So what, is there a second race that Tinker found out about? That made him like, oh, now we can go there? Or did the writers forget that element of the episode that they mentioned earlier? Bit of an inconsistency there, a bit weird, but it is what it is. I'm going to give Season 2, Episode 6 of the new Scooby-Doo movies 4 stars out of 5. So yes, after 5 episodes of the new Scooby-Doo movies Season 2, finally, we broke the streak of average episodes, and Speed Buggy delivered us a Halloween miracle and gave us a 4-star episode. And it was really a great episode all around. I really had a great time with it. I do have some issues with it. It did fall, it's not perfect in any means, because otherwise it would have been a 5. But I'll get into my negatives first before I get into the positives for this episode and what made it so good and what helped it break the streak of mid-episodes. Starting with the negatives, my first one is that I thought the villains of the episode were weak in my mind. So the hooded Windmakers, there were like 4 of them. I believe that's what they're called. They weren't scary or entertaining. I mean, even me dressed up like this right now, I'm more fucking scary than them. Like, I'm going to scare more people than they were. Like, if I were to dress up as them, they weren't scary in the slightest. Now, that's not to say that a Scooby-Doo villain needs to be scary in order for me to enjoy them. But they weren't enjoyable either. They weren't entertaining. They didn't stand out in any way. Literally, like, nothing about them was interesting. So they were very boring villains, very bland villains, very weak villains, because they weren't scary or creepy. The creepiest they got was in the nighttime sequence. But, I mean, after that, it was like they were talking normally. They did nothing to make them sound threatening. Nothing at all. They just were very bland and weak villains. So, yeah, they just weren't the best villains in my mind, and very, very weak in the villain department for this episode. Outside of costume, Mr. Peabody was the bank manager. wasn't really interesting outside of costume. I mean, all he really did was just, like, kind of pretend like something was happening at his bank and played kind of dumb, like he didn't know any better, like he didn't know anything. But outside of that, he didn't really do anything. He didn't really stand out much. He was only in one scene, so yeah, he was very uninteresting outside of costume, and we never get to see his other henchmen unmasked. So I'm assuming they're just hired henchmen that he hired for this episode. They were just 3 unnamed hired henchmen that we never find out about. So yeah, not really interesting outside of costume. There was a lack of suspects in this episode. So normally 2 suspects would be good because we had Clem Duncan, the farmer, and we had Mr. Peabody, the bank manager. So those were 2 suspects, and they did a good job making each of the making each of them suspicious. However, because we had 4 villains in total, like at the beginning of the episode, you're led to believe that it's supposed to be one dude, one hooded guy, but then we find out that there's more than one, and ends up being 4. So yeah, 2 suspects would normally be good, but because we have 4 villains and only 2 suspects in the episode, yeah, not really. You definitely need more in the suspect department if you're going to do that. But yeah, it is what it is. Like there just wasn't a good amount of suspects in the episode for these villains. And then my final negative is that I found the atmosphere of the episode to be weak. Now, don't get me wrong, like, the nighttime sequence really had some great atmosphere. Like, when they were investigating the town and the church and the graveyard and all that, it was creepy throughout, during the nighttime sequence. But through most of the episode, it was during daytime, and it's not that daytime, during the day, you can't have any sort of atmosphere or anything. You can. It's just, for this episode, I didn't really feel it. I just didn't really feel any sort of tension or suspense or creepiness or eeriness. There was creepiness or eeriness during the nighttime sequence, especially in the church and cemetery sequence. But outside of that, I didn't really feel any sort of tension or suspense for the gang's safety, probably because the villains didn't really do much that really stood out. They didn't stand out as villains, so they weren't threatening the gang's safety. I also wasn't I was interested in the mystery, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't on the edge of my seat wondering what was happening next. And yeah, it just wasn't creepy and eerie through the whole way out. So to me, while there was potential for atmosphere, and they almost did it, they had a portion of the episode that they hit on the atmosphere. They just didn't continuously do that for the rest of the episode, and that's quite a shame, because the nighttime sequences, I feel, did have atmosphere. But the daytime sequences, which is what most of the episode consists of, didn't really have that same atmosphere. So it's a shame, but yeah, the atmosphere definitely wasn't utilized to the best of the abilities. So I'm kind of mixed on the atmosphere, because on the one hand, like the nighttime sequence, I really liked the atmosphere. But then during the day, not so much. And that's not really like a night-day thing. Like, I'm not saying that you can't have atmosphere during the daytime. It's just that they didn't really execute it well during the daytime like they did during the nighttime sequences. But anyway, that's all I got for negatives. So I think it's about time we get on to the positives of the episode and what I really enjoyed about this episode and what helped it break the streak of average episodes. So starting off the positives, my first one is that Fred, I thought, was a good leader in this episode. He didn't really take charge in the leadership department. I think, like, all of them had shared leadership. I think Fred, Velma, Mark, and Debbie all shared that leadership. I don't think any one of them had sole leadership. But Fred definitely did have some leadership in this episode, and I think that was good. I also think that he had good chemistry with Mark, and that makes sense considering Mark is very similar to Fred, very modeled after Fred. So yeah, I think Fred overall was good. He had good chemistry with Mark, and he was a good leader for most of the episode and got to share that leadership with others. Daphne had good chemistry with Debbie in this episode. Not as good as Velma probably, but I think the girls all had their little chemistry group. All the girls really were very close knit in this episode. Daphne was very close with Debbie, and that makes sense because Debbie's very much modeled and inspired by Daphne and Velma, kind of like a mix between the two. So Daphne had good chemistry with Debbie. And I also think Daphne was very proactive in wanting to help solve the mystery. I think she was very proactive in, in this mystery and wanted to do, everything she could to help find clues, to help solve the mystery. So in that respect, I think Daphne was good. Then we have Velma. Now, Velma I thought was good in this episode as well. I think Velma was also a good leader in this episode, as I alluded to earlier. I don't think she pieced together the clues to help solve the mystery, because by the end, the sheriff and Clem Duncan are both giving the explanation of what the villain's plan and motive was. And you don't see Velma really piecing anything together. You don't see her putting the pieces of the puzzle together and figuring out, oh, this is what's going on. Like, Velma doesn't really give the explanation at the end, which leads me to believe that she really wasn't much in, doing much mystery solving, but more so leadership. I think she was trying to do that, but I don't think she really pieced it together as well as she would normally do it in other episodes. But yeah, and also I think she also had good chemistry with Debbie, like I said before. Her, Daphne, and Debbie all had like a little close-knit girl group. Like, they were very close together, and they had great chemistry with each other. They were together for a lot of the episode, and like I said, Debbie's very much an inspiration and a mix between Daphne and Velma. But Debbie definitely, has the looks of Daphne, but definitely it has more of the personality like Velma. Like, she's very much proactive and wanting to help solve the mystery and being a leader and all that. So, but the Velma was good in this episode. And then finally, you have Shaggy and Scooby. Shaggy and Scooby were really good in this episode as well. They were their usual funny, cowardly selves. Nothing new here. They were very funny and entertaining in this episode. They were their usual cowardly selves as well. Very funny, very entertaining, but also very cowardly. And I think they had good chemistry with Speed Buggy and Tinker. I don't think Tinker really had much chemistry with a lot of the members of the gang, but I think he had small moments with Shaggy. And I think Shaggy, Scooby, and Speed Buggy definitely had that group dynamic. Like, if Debbie, Daphne, and Velma were close-knit, I think Shaggy, Scooby, and Speed Buggy, and maybe Tinker as well, also were quite close-knit in this episode and had, like, that little guys group. So, yeah, I thought they had good chemistry with Speed Buggy and Tinker in this episode. And Shaggy and Scooby just did their usual routine of being their usual funny, cowardly selves, which is what I love to see. I don't need something special from them. As long as they fulfill their roles and do what they need to, I enjoy it. And they were funny in this episode. They were a lot of fun to watch, and they were really funny and entertaining. And some of the stuff they got scared at made sense. Next up, we have the guest star of the episode, Speed Buggy, along with his crew. How was Speed Buggy in this episode as a guest star? I like Speed Buggy in this episode. I'm not going to lie. Speed Buggy was a good guest star in this episode. And so was his crew. They were all great, and it was for a lot of different reasons. Like I said, I think Mark and Debbie were very much good leaders in this episode. Tinker helped, fix the mystery machine. Speed Buggy had, was very, helped save the day a couple times. It helped save people when they were in danger. So, yeah, I think Speed Buggy and his crew, they did try to help solve the mystery. They were very much involved with it. Like the Scooby Gang, they were very invested in the mystery. They all had good chemistry with each different member of the Scooby Gang. Fred fit well with Mark. Debbie fit well with Daphne and Velma. Tinker fit well with Shaggy. And Speed Buggy also fit well with Shaggy as well as Scooby. So I think they all worked well, not just with the Scooby Gang as well, but with each other. You could tell they had a good group dynamic, and I really do like Speed Buggy and his crew, his gang. I think they were all great. I think they, despite being very much modeled after the Scooby Gang, they did play off the Scooby Gang well, and are definitely one of the better, guest stars in the new Scooby-Doo movies. And it's always fun seeing Scooby-Doo's copycats or clones team up with them. And yeah, I really love the Speed Buggy and his crew. I think Speed Buggy is a lot of fun. He's definitely, I think there's a reason why he's often brought up as one of, the favorites when it comes to who you like when it comes to Scooby-Doo clones and copycats. I can see why he's in the discussion, as he's definitely very fun, very entertaining, and his crew is very fun and entertaining. So yeah, I really love the Speed Buggy crew. I think all of them played their role very excellent. They were proactive in wanting to help solve the mystery. They all had good chemistry with each member of the Scooby Gang, and they had good chemistry with each other. So, no complaints with me here with the guest stars. The guest star was great. I thought the motive of the villain was actually really good in this episode. So, the motive is that he wanted to scare everyone away from Winona so that he could buy the whole land of Winona dirt cheap and then turn it into a resort. Now, a land motive isn't anything new. Like, it's nothing new in the Scooby-Doo universe. We've danced along with this before. We've had this motive before. You know, land motives are nothing new in the Scooby-Doo franchise. But it has some flavor to it because he's changing the land into a resort, which I don't think is something that has been done yet in the Scooby-Doo franchise up to this point when it comes to land motive. You know, so he wants to change it into a resort and make profit off of it. I think that's a really cool motive. I think it has some flavor to it. So while the motive isn't anything unique or fresh or new, it's a nice take on the usual Scooby-Doo motive. Like, yeah, he wants land, he wants to buy it dirt cheap, typical Scooby-Doo type of motive. But he wants to turn it into a resort, which is something we hadn't seen yet, and that's a really neat idea. Like, he's going to take this resort and presumably make a big profit off that. So he's also going to get, so technically it's also a bit of a money motive as well, but it's more so a land motive, and I think it's while it may be, a classic old school Scooby-Doo motive, it works because it has some flavor to it. Like I've said plenty of times before, you can reuse Scooby-Doo motives as long as there's some type of flavor, some type of uniqueness to it that can make it stand out, something different to help make it stand out. So if you can use a land or money motive millions of times, it just depends on how you use it. Like, do you use it well? Like, does it stand out? If it does, then I'll like it. But if you don't, and if you use it to its bare bones and generic version of it, then I won't like it. But thankfully, they didn't use it to their bare bones and generic version of it. And they made it with some flavor and some uniqueness and some freshness by having him wanting to turn it into a resort, which I think was a good motive. So I thought the mystery of the episode was good in this episode. I actually really liked the mystery. So in this mystery of the episode, you want to know why this town is having weird winds. Why specifically Winona is having these weird winds at night? What's the cause of it? Why is it happening? And also, who are these hooded men in the shadows? Like, what's their involvement? Are they connected to the winds? Do they have no involvement with the winds and are doing something else entirely and doing something shady? What's their involvement in it? Who are they? Are they the cause of the winds? If so, how are they causing it? Like, a lot of good questions, and we get good answers to it. So to me, the mystery was good, it was engaging, it was interesting, and I liked it. The clues of the episode were also good as well. I thought the clues were great. So you had the whole map of the parchment map of the whole Winona area. You had the giant wind machine, and then you had Mr. Peabody's scale model of the town and how, turn into a resort. Each of these clues help the audience, in what the motive was for the villain at the end, just before he was unmasked, and how they were going about their operation, like how they were doing these things. So the clues were good. We definitely finally got clues back after the last episode was lacking clues. It seems like we keep going on and off with clues. Like, one episode will have it, and then the next episode won't. So thankfully, this episode has it. Hopefully, the next two will continue that. I really don't want to have, episodes back and forth, not having any clues. So hopefully, they'll continue that. But yeah, the clues were good in this episode. They did do a good job on the clue front, pointing towards the motive and how the villains were, accomplishing their motive, like how they were accomplishing these weird wins. And my final positive is I found the setting of the episode to be good. So the town of Winona is actually really cool. It's like this deserted town, that's having weird winds at night. This episode is very similar in concept to the Spooky Fog of Juneberry, but I think the Spooky Fog of Juneberry actually has a better, more effective type of spooky weird phenomenon when it comes to weather than Winona does, because winds aren't necessarily scary to me, but a fog, that's a little bit different. Fogs are pretty creepy. But still, I think that's probably why they call them weird winds rather than spooky fog, like, the spooky fog of Juneberry call it. They didn't call it spooky winds, they just called it weird fogs. Like, they were just weird. Like, why were they happening? But I did like the setting of the episode because there was a lot of variety in it. We got to explore a lot of different areas in Winona. We got to be at the church, the cemetery, the clothing store, Mr. Peabody's bank, the Winona Hall records, the cave system underneath the mountain. Clem Duncan's farm. There's just a lot of areas we went to in this episode, and I really like that. I really like that we got to explore different parts of Winona, and it was really awesome, and it made the setting very fresh and very variety-filled because we got to explore a lot of different areas in Winona. So the setting was great due to the variety of it and me enjoying all the different locations we would go to throughout the episode. So I enjoyed the setting. I think it was great. Even though it's not anything new or fresh, they did have some fun little things in there because we got to see a lot of different areas of the town. Like, it's probably similar in concept to, like, maybe the Miner 49er episode, in a, abandoned or desolate town. But, the Miner 49er episode didn't really explore it much, whereas I feel like this episode really does explore a lot of areas in the town. But yeah, it's very similar to that, and I like that. I like when the setting has variety and you get to go into different locations and you're not just stuck to one location throughout the episode. So, overall, guys, I would recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. It's a really good episode. It's a fun and enjoyable crossover episode with Speed Buggy that does almost everything well. It just misses the mark when it comes to the villain and the atmosphere, as well as the lack of suspects and the outside of costume element. But it's really just the villain and the atmosphere. If they had just tweaked those two, it would have been a 5 out of 5 easily. But still, though, great episode, fun and enjoyable episode. And I had a great time with it. Definitely a good, fun Halloween treat. Not really the scariest episode. Not one that I would recommend probably for Halloween. It's not the scariest episode. And definitely not the first choice I would recommend when it comes to Halloween's sake. But it's still a good, fun, and enjoyable episode. And hey, maybe it's still Scooby-Doo, and you can watch. I feel like you can probably watch any Scooby-Doo episode in Halloween. So if you want to, you can watch this tonight, and as a little Halloween treat. I certainly would do it. It's a good episode. It's a fun and enjoyable episode, and yeah, it does everything well. Had they just cleaned up the atmosphere and villains, I think I would have given this easily a 5 out of 5. But I'm just happy that we broke the streak of mid-episodes. So, good job, Speed Buggy. Thankfully, you stopped the streak of mid-episodes. Let's hope that the next 2 guest stars can continue that trend. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Do you like me? Do you consider it one of the better episodes in the new Scooby-Doo movies? Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Like, is this not really a good episode in your mind? Do you feel like maybe it's a bit overrated, or maybe not, not a good crossover with Speed Buggy? Or are you somewhere in the middle where you just think it's average and decent and okay, but it's not good or bad? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby-Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, obviously I'll have more Scooby-Doo reviews on the way. Scooby-Doo is now obviously going to be is the focus of my channel. Is always going to be the focus of my channel, and I'm not going to stop talking about all things Scooby anytime soon. And when it comes to other content, Mr. Freddy Krueger will definitely get some spotlight on my channel one day. I definitely want to review his movies as well and give him some attention. While he's not my favorite slasher, that right goes to Jason. He is one of my favorites. Probably my 3rd favorite, right behind Michael and Jason. I love Freddy, but definitely not my favorite. But I will review Freddy's movies. They're going to be a blast to do, and I will one day do that on my channel as maybe like one of my side projects. But yeah, if you're in the mood if you're a big Scooby-Doo fan like me and you're a diehard Scooby-Doo fan and you want to see all Scooby-Doo media talked about, not just the popular stuff and just the bare bones stuff, then come to this channel and experience some amazing Scooby-Doo content where we dive into all things Scooby-Doo. And also, if you're a horror fan in general, you can also join this channel because I like to do horror reviews from time to time of characters, and Mr. Freddy Krueger, like I said, will be getting the spotlight sooner or later. Jason's definitely been the first one that I've done for. I'm thinking of doing a Halloween tradition where I maybe do some reviews from Michael's movies. But yes, Mr. Freddy Krueger will be getting some attention on this channel as well. Not as much attention as Scooby, because Scooby's the main franchise that I love the most and is near and dear to my heart, and is the franchise that I'm a diehard fan of. But Mr. Freddy Krueger will be getting some attention as well, and we will review his films one day, and maybe some other stuff as well. In my next video, we'll be back to my regularly scheduled, program. As we're not getting out of the special months, and we'll be going back to the normal months, and we will be continuing my reviews of the new Scooby-Doo movies with Season 2, Episode 7 of the new Scooby-Doo movies, titled Haunted Candy Factory, guest starring Cass Elliot. And I'm not really looking forward to the episode. I've not heard good things about it. I don't remember the episode well. So honestly, I have a bad feeling that we might not have good episodes for long. Maybe Cass Elliot can hopefully provide us with a good episode. But we will see if Cass Elliot can continue the trend of good episodes, or if my skeptical nature will be proven right and we will get another dud. So hopefully that will not be the case, but we'll see if Cass Elliot does a good job. But yeah, folks, we are 2 episodes away from finishing the new Scooby-Doo movies, and I am very excited to finally finish off the new Scooby-Doo movies. And don't worry, the new Scooby-Doo movies is not going anytime soon. Like every other Scooby-Doo show, I plan to make some topic videos of it, some ranking videos of it, and a special video that I'm hoping to make, after the series is over, is a defense video for the new Scooby-Doo movies, because the new Scooby-Doo movies gets a lot of shit and gets a lot of hate from a lot of people, and I want to make a defense video for it because I love the new Scooby-Doo movies. It's in my top 5. It's probably my 4th favorite show in the franchise. I love this show, and it gets a lot of hate from Scooby-Doo fans. And so I want to give new Scooby-Doo fans some new perspective on the show. So if you have any criticisms of the new Scooby-Doo movies that you think I should address in a defense video, please let me know, because I have some criticisms in mind. But if you have any additional criticisms that I can use, then please, let me know, because I will definitely try to address all of them in that defense video, and hopefully get people to appreciate the show more and love it for what it is, because it's not that bad of a show. I've seen way worse Scooby-Doo shows, and this show definitely deserves more love. It certainly does not get the love and attention it deserves, and that's why I'm going to make that video after the new Scooby-Doo movies is done. Maybe not immediately after, but I will start working on that type of video after that. But yeah, if you want to hear my thoughts on the Cass Elliot episode, then come join me next time. So once again, guys, happy Halloween to all of you guys. I hope you guys are having a great Halloween. And now I'm going to put on my Freddy Krueger mask and go out and scare some trick-or-treaters and scare the living shit out of them, and have a good night, and watch either a horror movie or maybe a Scooby episode. Who knows? We'll see how I feel. Maybe because of my Freddy Krueger attire, maybe I might watch a Freddy movie. I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to go out and scare the shit out of people as Freddy Krueger now. And I hope you guys will do the same and dress up in any sort of costume that you have. And just keep the Halloween spirit alive, because Halloween is the best holiday of the year. I love Halloween. I love Halloween, and I think the spirit has died a little bit. So let's reinvigorate it. Let's get that Halloween spirit going, and have a fantastic Halloween, guys. Thank you for joining me on this episode, and yeah, and as always, peace out.
looking for you. Scooby, Scooby-Doo, where are ya?
Over there.
All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without ya. Scooby, Scooby-Doo.